Hi, Rachel. Happy Sunday.
Hi, Katie. Wonderful to see you. Happy Sunday to you as well.
So you had a massive job in the corporate world and but was very successful.
Yeah.
However, that was not great for your soul
Yeah.
and took some time out, took a break. And
Yeah.
actually now you are on a completely redefined mission to change the way that we lead and how we work. And you have like a very bold statement on your website that says, I believe that the way that we work and lead needs to evolve. Leadership is an inside job and you are starting the ReSoul Revolution. And does that kind of encapsulate where you are today?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Okay.
I started to take a risk and talk about soul within organizations. What was a resold culture? What is the soul of a culture? And recognized that, and people started to really respond. And so
Yeah.
then I started to really pivot, take that risk, and completely align with kind of my whole mission of bringing consciousness into the world, but really that inside job that as a leader, as a human, it is an inside job in how we show up, because then it impacts everything we do, the decisions we make, how we come across to others, and lead from a place of clarity, lead from a place of soul, lead from a place of pure confidence. And that to me is soul.
Well, I obviously wholeheartedly agree, which is why we're both here. And it's kind of a lovely story as to how we connected. So you are basically literally on a mission to, it's not just about, your business. You are literally on a mission to gather like-minded people and to change the way that we work and lead. And you reached out to me on LinkedIn. And honestly, I remember just clicking and looking, and you using the word soul was the very reason that I was like, hey, Rachel, yes, let's talk. And then since then,
Yeah.
we've had lots of conversations
Yeah.
and we both feel really passionate about the same things. I volunteer. I want to join your ReSoul Revolution. I really think it's amazing. And getting down to leadership is an inside job. So maybe we just start there. If you could break it down or describe really simply how and why is leadership an inside job? Because I think there are some people out there that would just think that it is a job, not an inside job.
Yeah.
And there's a really fine difference between the two.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it comes down to energy. It comes down to our nervous systems, right? And it's an internal state that we operate from. And when we are regulated as a human, we have to learn how to regulate ourselves so that then we can lead effectively. And so I came up with this idea of what is the resold leader is when we're centered, when we understand how to regulate ourselves, we become clear, we become level-headed, we have empathy for ourselves and for others. And then we become accountable for our own behaviors, our own actions. And so that we then understand how to regulate our nervous systems and lead more effectively.
So, but one interesting question. I know this might sound like a really stupid question, but why is it important to regulate yourself? I think my guess would be that in a leadership role, your impact on others is the recipe to success. But I don't think that people necessarily think about it like that. So,
Yeah.
If we break it down to in a leadership role, your job is what? And why is your sense of self and your energy? Because I think people in today's world, it's starting to change, but not a lot of people talk about energy at work.
Right.
And obviously I love it. But I think how could you describe the importance of energy from one person to another and why that matters in a work context?
Yeah, absolutely. I think of energy as it's almost like this metaphor of a tennis game, right? And so when you're playing tennis with someone who is better than you, you improve. And when you play tennis with someone who is not as good as you, we kind of adapt our behavior. And I look at energy as something very similar. So we know what it feels like to be around someone who is calm and centered, where you feel safe. You can have a dialogue, a conversation. And we also know what it's like to be around someone whose energy is very frenetic, high strung, judgmental. Like, we get those feelings. That all comes from within. It's an inside job in terms of how to recognize how we come across to others, but how to really ground and center our energy. They feel they can approach that idea of psychological safety. So we feel safe around these people, and we want to help, support, collaborate, be accountable. So then becomes this high performing synergistic team, but that starts within ourselves.
Right. The phrase psychological safety, I wish we could like rebrand and just, call it like comfort at work or something. I don't know. But it sounds HRy and scary when we say psychological safety. But what we mean is enabled to be yourself.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay. So then if it's and a leader usually sets the tone for a room, a Zoom meeting, a relationship, a context, a project, all of those things. So that word calm sounds really important. There is one thing that you need to almost like ground yourself in calm so that the impact that you have on others enables them to be the best version of themselves and to be honest and truthful and speak up and perform. And therefore, together, you're all leveling up to become high performers, which in the end impacts business success.
Exactly.
Is that okay? That's right. But then I think where in today things can get a bit confused is if you think about a typical 2026 leader, the difference between talking about energy and how you show up to work versus talking about revenue and EBITDA feels quite far apart. Do you want to just explain why you're on such a mission to just connect with like-minded people? Because I loved that part. It's just that actually there's a bigger purpose to all of this.
Absolutely. And so my whole mission is literally, as we become more conscious as a human, we change the paradigm of how we lead in the world. And that's what the world, I believe, needs now, especially today.
What does paradigm mean?
Paradigm. So we have been taught from society, from culture, as we've grown and evolved in, our leadership roles, that it's performative. It's all about profit and margin. And that is all important. But what it's kind of actually counterintuitive that if we lead from the soul, when we are grounded and centered, when we are calm, we are much more clear, level-headed. That is a paradigm shift. The programming of how we show up is a paradigm of, rather than the shoulds and the performative aspects, the transactional level of how we've been taught to lead, is a paradigm shift from doing it from within, and success comes naturally after that. The business seeds after.
Is the opposite of what we've all been taught to believe. And do you feel that we are almost going to be forced, or that the world is going to have that shift to, we can only be successful if we are leading from the soul, and that people are going to be forced to realize this?
I think, and so that's a really great question. I think there are two extremes that we're seeing. I'm seeing in politics, we're seeing, all over the world. And so this idea of what I call our soul, it is our own soul responsibility, literally, as a human, to show up more conscious, more aware, more level-headed, especially with the level of and extremes this world is going through right now. And so when we are able to show up, then that is contagious. That's an energy. And so naturally, then that happens. And so, rather than thinking about, I've got to change the world, what if we were just able to make choices and have that freedom from within to know that in itself is an impact, that in itself is contagious. So that will happen naturally versus this idea of force and we need to train, so I'm coming into organizations now with this idea of what does it mean to be a ReSoul leader, and taking people through a process of not as a group, a cohort, as a leadership cohort, what I call the ReSoul labs, that to help people understand how to shift and change from inside out. I talk to people every single day who want to leave the paradigm of how we've been leading and how corporations are being kind of run today, and making that conscious choice. I don't want to do that anymore. And I want to seek out an environment that feels safe, that feels conscious, that I can do purpose-driven work. And whether it's selling a widget or whether it's showing up each day, right? As just a human being, that's how you make an impact, making a difference.
I can imagine as soon as you get into an organization, like the hardest part, well, I say the hardest part, the decision to bring you in is a kind of real clear signal of change. It's all of the stuff that happens before that that is, or it's the fact that this is optional. You need to self-select. Yes, over here, this business could really do with resouling. We would love to be more intentional. We would love to be more aligned. And from there, you have some people that may not be on board, but you can work slowly and change their mind. The work has started. It's where the work is not even, there isn't even a realization that the work is needed. Maybe that's where the kind of collective and the community is coming from, because the more of us that talk about this, the more we can spread the word. I think it is having a passion about it and being confident to talk about it, and maybe that's where we start. But I don't think it should be optional. I believe that this should be something everyone has to do.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. But I think, it's super interesting in kind of the psychology of it all. Like when we tell people as a leader or as an org, we need to do this, right? People start to resist, or what's wrong, or there's something wrong with my performance, or what's wrong with this culture. And it's more of, if that sole responsibility as a human, as a leader, to show up, and people are like, wow, why is this person so centered? Why is this person so clear, so empathetic? And people gravitate towards that. And they're like, how did you do that? Then that's the revealing aspect. Here's how I did it. And then people are like, okay, I want some of that. And so I think it's then so it's interesting where, not everybody is open to this. And so, but what people are open to is if someone is approachable, leading effectively, and successful with the impact of the business, right? And rather than leading from a hierarchical ego state, where it's very competitive, and people don't feel safe to be able to show up and make mistake, right? It's then that's the difference, right? And those people will weed themselves out with this sort of work if they do not choose or self-select in that way. But you're right. Going back to that, your first statement was, there are companies and organizations who recognize how important this is. And maybe we don't talk about soul at first. It's more about level of awareness and mindset, and the lens through which you see yourself and others, and how do we become a high-performing team. But it's how we translate the word soul once we get in there.
I mean, I absolutely love the word soul, and I think the bravery is spot on, because it will attract the right person to then echo that. So, okay, what is a business like without a soul?
Yeah.
Or what is a leader like without a soul, and what is the impact of that?
So we can call it like, what is the soul of a culture, or what is the soul of a company or of a leader? Like this idea. And so we can see the difference. We feel the difference at the end of the day, where it's highly transactional. People are disengaged. It's super competitive. Without people show up to work without purpose. The symptoms are burnout, anxiety, depression, competition, disengagement. We all have experienced at some time or the other this idea of a toxic culture. That is a culture without the soul, where the people aren't, it's very siloed environment. People aren't working together. They don't know why they get up every day, individually and then collectively. A culture with soul understands a collective purpose, that is actually, and it's not just values on a wall or stating the mission, of the company. It's really the being. How do we show up each day, and how does that show up in our day-to-day interactions, and the engagement of the work that we're doing, even if it's selling a widget. It's like, how does this impact me, and how do I impact others, just by merely being a solid, grounded, empathetic, accountable person with some soul responsibility. And so we feel that becomes a soul-driven culture versus a performative culture, a transactional culture. And so that's the contrast.
And the job to be done is to almost connect the soulful leadership to the higher performance quicker, because I think that's where we know that everyone is in business for revenue, profit, margin, etc. And quite often those are the things that are driving the other behaviors that are not helpful, because people think that they can get there faster or quicker through using other avenues which are less soulful. However, it's almost like we need to figure out how we can prove that the more soulful your leadership is and the more soulful your business is, that the more profitable, the more sustainable you will have a better business. It's just connecting those two dots. It feels quite hard to do today.
It's hard, but actually very simple if we start to operationalize this framework as an example. And so we can see, once we implement this, this idea of becoming a resold leader, a resold company, that the impact it has on the business. People are engaged, they show up every day with purpose, they collaborate more effectively, prioritize consciously, they communicate with this deep sense of purpose. And so quickly, people, you can see that impact, you can feel that impact on the business. So you can start measure the ROI on that.
I completely agree. I think it is that to the believers or the people that are already like, yes, I'm totally kind of signed up to this. This sounds very straightforward, but I think it is almost how, like, I would love to find a way to get to a really punchy, succinct way to describe that if you do X, your business could be Y more profitable or whatever. Because I think, I have a hunch, there are lots of businesses out there that are successful from a revenue and EBITDA perspective, but there's still not a lot of soul. And actually, if you were able to level that up, then it could be incredibly successful. But if you're successful enough over here in the revenue and the EBITDA side of things, it's quite easy not to have to pay attention to the other things because you're successful enough, but you don't know what it could be if you were to address this. And like, that's the bit that I'm like, I want to find a way, myth bust it or really prove it. But it's just going to take a bit of time, and it's going to it needs more of us to be doing this in a consistent way.
Exactly. And that, I think, that is the key word, the focus and discipline, persistence and consistence that changes behavior over time. as neuroscience works, right? It's the brain, and this is what I talk about in my book, the ReSoul Revolution. This idea of ritual, this discipline and ritual, and just take micro moments each day to start to change. And so, not just within an individual, but within an organization. So, what are the bits and pieces? 3 to 17 seconds to be able to reset, pause, and reset to balance and calm the nervous system, as an example. And
I
so that
remember you saying this. If you just go a bit deeper on the I think what is that window? How are we supposed to be using that time, and how many times a day should we be doing it? Maybe we just sit here for 17 seconds. Brief us, and we
Right. I love it. I love it. So actually, I've created an app. It's coming out in a couple of weeks, hopefully, but it's exactly that. It's a way to be, it's not, to be able to understand what I call the ReSoul ritual. So one of the examples is at least 5 times a day, you get a notification around a challenge that you may have, right? And so I get triggered in this type of meeting with this type of person. So how can you pause, reset, and the feeling? So how do you want to feel? I want to feel relaxed, calm, and confident. When do you feel like that? That visualization, like an Olympic athlete visualizes the feeling place of when they're at. It has nothing to do. It could have nothing to do with being in that meeting. As an example, I visualize myself when I'm running with my dog. I'm in nature. It calms my nervous system. Then I have this statement. So then I can just have it, on alarm on my phone or notification in the app and I have people that I work with, clients who think, oh my gosh, this was so useful because I was in this meeting. I noticed my nervous system getting jacked up and I was able to pause and reset just because I got this quick notification and just to be, and then you can think clearly. You're in this calm state, the resouled state. And then you have more clarity in terms of how you speak effectively. And that is a process in itself, but it doesn't take much time at all. It's just about inside that kind of rather than out of sight, out of mind, it is in sight quickly. And that's how the brain starts to change, just to pause and reset.
So when you say pause and reset, it's kind of like a micro meditation or a micro reset. The principle is you catch your energy changing live, and you can take yourself to a calm place by picturing something else and reground yourself to come back into the moment. That is essentially the exercise.
I would say from a somatic place, this idea, what I call the Bell model, body, emotion, and language. So each can be used as an entry point in order to regulate our nervous system. So if you're when we're anxious or frustrated and experiencing anxiety or anger, we're tight in our bodies. You feel that in our and what is it that you're thinking to yourself? So the body, the language, the belief system is the language that elicits an emotion, a feeling, and that it impacts the body. And so that each are interrelated. And so when you're feeling wonderful, when you're feeling calm, what is it that you're thinking and feeling? What is happening in your body? And how can you shift your language so that, like my statement, my mantra, my ReSoul ritual is, I am relaxed, calm, and confident. I use it often. I call it segment intending when I'm either anticipating something that stresses me out or in the moment it catches me off guard. I can quickly use this really quick framework to get me back to a centered place. But it doesn't work if you're not feeling and visualizing it, not just stating it, not just like an affirmation. It's really feeling it and understanding how the body, emotion, and language interrelate together.
Right, which is where the task of an inside job is larger than just a micro moment. However, if you are able to do some foundational work on yourself, which is always ongoing. I think most people that I talk to, it is a life's work, but it's kind of finding the joy in that and the fact that it is a constant. We as humans, we are a constant task, piece of work. It's never going to be done.
We're never done. It is always evolving. It's just like, I think of it as weeding, right? We weed and weed. We have to do that every day, whether it's vacuuming or weeding. our mind is a muscle, just as like we have to maintain it, and just little bits of maintenance that are proactive have such a long-term impact. We're always evolving, we're always growing, we're always shifting, and so how do we adapt to that shift?
That's really interesting. Some of this people might struggle to grab onto the word energy, etc. But if you take your leadership, your leadership is a muscle, and essentially you need the muscle to be fit and healthy in the first place to perform, and then you need to maintain it, and you constantly need to keep that fed, nourished, stretched, all of the above, and sometimes it can be a little bit uncomfortable or off, or you could be injured, all of the above, but essentially your goal is always trying to bring it back to optimum health in a muscle, and it's a living, breathing thing that you need to work on all day, every day, and some days are harder than others.
Exactly. And I think you just described soul right there. When something's not working, when an organization is not effective, when people are quitting, when there is burnout and anxiety, there's a lot of old programming and stories. It's called an unspoken working agreements. That is a culture. So what is not safe to speak up? It's we don't have a purpose, and so how we create or get to our soul is to really uncover the unspoken, which is the lack of awareness that we have individually and then collectively, to be able to get back to the soul, kind of cleaning it up, and or creating it.
Yeah. And it doesn't whatever works for you. But I think that if you're a gym bro and you totally acknowledge the fact that working out is how you stay fit and healthy, think of your soul, your leadership, and the company as like a muscle. You can kind of connect soul muscle. If you're into energy or even slightly woo woo, then let's embrace the energy and soul terminology. It's trying to get this to be broadly appealing to everybody so that they can understand how important it is, so that we can all collectively change to be better and to make this world a better place, this working world a better place, and have a better place for people to thrive. They're spending 80-90% of their day at work, and we need to be making it a really positive experience so that they can go on and then create a more positive experience.
Absolutely. You've just named it right there.
And in terms of the consistency, so what can people assume that you've gone deep and you've done some of the foundational work? What are some of the ongoing things that you can do each day to kind of check in with yourself or make sure that you are calm, relaxed, and confident?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it doesn't have to be a whole lot, but something, and this is kind of what I realized for myself, and everybody's different. I call, these idea of ReSoul ritual. So for example, I get up, and this is how I actually wrote the book 300 pages later was
I have the book here. I have the book.
Good. I got up each day and gave myself a goal of writing for 2 minutes. And the book really was my journal. And so, so those 2 minutes, what was within those 2 minutes? So something I was grateful for. What were 3 victories that I experienced the day before? It could have been just getting out of bed. The other part was listening to something really brief that is inspiring. All of which took me about 10 minutes total. Before I dove into my email, jumped out of bed, gone onto a meeting, I had my cup of coffee, and I had these little things that made such a big impact. So that started my day. And then I realized, then something happened. Boom. My nervous system was dysregulated and I started my day great. And then I was just off center. So what did I need in those moments? And so that became the ritual. I'm relaxed, calm, and confident, as an example. I visualized and felt that. And so I had an alarm on my phone, a sticky note on my laptop, and so those were just little things that made a big impact. Even, Jay Shetty, he has a great acronym called TIME. TIME is something you're thankful for. something of inspiration, and then meditation. And for him, he describes meditation as just looking at a flower for 5 seconds, out your window. And then exercise, of course. I exercise every single day. Everybody knows that about me. And it's really about getting out into nature and walking my dog. That is a boundary that I set for myself each day. And what I call boundaries are expansive. They're not contractive. They actually expand our energy. So if we look and do create a structure, a system, a pattern that changes the brain, that changes the muscle, and it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be all or nothing approach, even 7 minutes of yoga, right? So anything that we could do from that self-care standpoint, in bits and pieces throughout the day, we show up more effectively. And that's more sustainable.
Yeah. So it is little micro moments each day that, I mean, you can say boundary is also like little commitments that feel achievable for yourself. It's kind of landing the importance of, if you're able to do this, it will impact your energy and your performance, which then in turn impacts everybody else's performance. And so it's kind of like landing the importance of these really small things that seemingly don't seem, that important in the day, all add up to all of these things that are huge. There was something that really made me stop and think, and I think it was, your habits today predict your future. And, I'm definitely not one for exercising, but I'm trying to get into it. But I am at an age now where it's like, oh, okay, you really do need to start thinking about these things and think about your future, and it's not just about now. But I think it's trying to make those things sound not woo-woo and like alien to some people. Because if you start to talk about energy or meditation or, even yoga, I think to some people is kind of like, whoa, that's not for me. And the kind of label means I'm switched off, I'm not interested in it. But if you think about it as you're literally keeping yourself, your soul fit and healthy so that you can do a great job. I think really we could do with some better language around these things, because a lot of it is just about being human, keeping your humanity in check, all of that. And it's that it's considered woo-woo or only for these types of people that is not helpful really, because everybody needs it. And yes, it would be fun to try and rename a lot of things so that they didn't trigger lots of other assumptions that would then put people off.
And that's the old programming. That's the old paradigm, right? And so we were taught to, like, especially within corporate environments, oh, that's woo-woo, that's, but if we use science and neuroscience and show the data of how self-care, right, simple exercises, how the brain works, simple habits, everybody's got a different habit that works for them to be able to shift and to change the old story, the old programming and the language piece, that will happen over time. And I think it's starting. But again,
I think it's starting, yeah.
Yeah. And just making it normalized. Yeah, go ahead.
Completely normalizing it. But something that I've observed, and I think this is a lot of people that I've spoken to that tend to be really into this kind of stuff and like proactively seeking it, are people that have been through some stuff, or some people when some things in life have happened to them that have almost forced them to look for help, to understand themselves more, to try and seek a happier way of life. And so, interestingly, I have noticed that the people that are more into this have experienced something probably less positive, but in the end, the outcome is more positive, and therefore life has forced them. And I think it is maybe the everyday person that's just nothing major has really happened, which would mean that they haven't found themselves somewhere they really don't want to be and had to find things to get them out of that. And I don't know, what do you think about that? That's just an observation.
I think, one of my favorite just being able to observe and witness the light bulb go off with someone. And so I work a lot in tech and a lot with software engineers who are super analytical, who they would, what? You're talking about emotion? That kind of work. But when I had the opportunity, not just at Microsoft and at GitHub, to bring in this sort of program, leadership
Yeah.
development. I didn't talk about soul exactly at that time, but it was super amazing to be able to witness and observe, like talking about this and just talking about the framework and how to shift our emotions and how to become calm and clear and how we came across. And people were like, wow, that's amazing. I feel better. I actually can engage and interact. And it's, you can be the smartest person in the room, but if you're not playing well in the sandbox, you're not going to
Yeah.
get very far. It's only takes, it's not sustainable. And so the light bulb going off for people who haven't necessarily had an interest in this work, and or had some intense life-changing experience we don't have to go through crisis. And I think that's the most important thing. Like, we all have what I call invisible backpacks. We've all got something that has happened in our lives to shape us who we are. And it doesn't have to be us getting to a crisis point or someone telling us to do something, but it's more of, having an open mind, a level of curiosity to how do we can actually feel better with simple things. We can actually engage and collaborate more effectively if we do these simple things. And that is, for me, I love that part of it.
Yeah, I can imagine seeing people change from going, oh, what is this, to being, oh my God, this is actually really amazing. Because really all we're trying to do as humans is to be happier, to be more
Yeah.
comfortable, to have a
Yeah.
better impact on others, to have a better impact in the world. And sometimes those can feel really big and scary things. And oh no, not me. That doesn't apply to me. But truthfully, we have an opportunity every day to kind of have a positive impact on somebody else's life. And in a weird way, that kind of cycles back and is really rewarding. That's certainly the most rewarding part of my job, is having a positive impact on other people and seeing them thrive. And, it does feel like a kind of chain of events. And you don't always get it right. I mean, there's going to be days where things go really, really wrong. And again, how you show up for that is super interesting as well.
How we grow and move forward, pick ourselves back up. We can only do our best given our level of, if we've had enough sleep, or if, we're physically exhausted or we're sick. Like, our best is different each day.
Yes.
But it's how the strength is, how quickly you can get yourself back to center. What can you do to yourself, for yourself each day by choice? And most important thing, the foundational part of this is believe you can change. We can't change. We don't believe if we can, right? And it doesn't, again, have to be these huge momentous sort of changes. It's just this incremental micro ritual each day that we have actually a choice as a human. And and we can be happy. It's actually that simple. I used to think that happiness was outside from validation or approval, and I used to think as a kid, oh, someday, God, when I'm happy, I hope at 26 I'll be happy, or I hope that what milestone. But to realize it's, again, an inside job. We cultivate happiness through a variety of different ways, and it really comes down to consciousness and self-care.
Okay, so there is that you're doing lots of amazing things. And I think if you are a business that is aware that you need help with resouling, there's obviously ReSoul Labs, your book, there is kind of coaching, there's all sorts of things that you can offer, which I think is amazing. And I feel like you are going to be very busy very quickly. So we can talk about that briefly, but I think also what is available to if you're just listening to this and you're starting from zero, I think the awareness and the interest in, oh, I can do something today that's complete. It's free. It's within your control. It's within your reach, and it's super simple. How would you advise that people just start? You've got the awareness, then what?
Then I would put it on your calendar, an alarm on your phone. How do you want to feel? And again, I keep going back to this foundational thing for me. I am relaxed, calm, and confident. When do you feel like that? Okay, imagine that. And that is the like free thing that you can do, and do it each and every day 5 times. I mean, that is the most simple way to start change, and believe that you can.
So if you break it down real simple, so you would put a reminder on your phone for 5 times a day. It's not you need to redefine your entire soul. It is just how do you come back to center, grounded, calm, and then build from there. And if you can do that 5 times a day, it will have a positive impact on you.
Absolutely. Yep. And I'm because I've experienced it for myself. I was kind of an all or nothing sort of person. If I can't run for an hour or do a class of yoga for an hour, then I can't, I'm not going to do it. Right. And so the wonderful thing about this is so achievable, digestible, and the little ritual neuroscience. That's how 21 days is what neuroscience says in order to change a habit. And it's reprogramming ourselves. Yeah.
So let's go for 17 seconds to make it simple. If you can max it, you're maxing it at 17 seconds. People can do 17 seconds. 17 seconds, 5 times a day for 21 days. That's your prescription, basically, is RX. You should put
exactly. RX. ReSoul. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you can do that for yourself over 21 days, just see what the difference is in your calmness, your clarity. Like, I think maybe we can kind of come back to the word clarity, because we've spoken a lot about that before, but it's like, why is clarity so important? And I think the way I interpreted it is that your own kind of emotions and motivations and agendas and everything are kind of out of the way, and you are literally focused in that moment on what needs to be done. And I think that is helpful for me. But yeah, how would you describe the importance of clarity and what clarity does?
Exactly. So when we are in a place of clarity, our nervous systems are regulated. And when I mean that is that, our heart is kind of at a normal rate. Our bodies are relaxed. We're not worried. We don't have the worry and the fear and the stories that are going on in the background that's creating anxiety and fear and frustration. That we feel confident, independent of people and situations. So we don't have these limiting thought patterns that are interrupting that. And so when we are clear, we lead with clarity. We are able to be focused without the noise of all this kind of underlying unconscious self-talk going on. And our bodies, and we feel that calm so that we can be clear. And that's how important, like, making decisions in the moment from a place of clarity is very different from a place of being reactive and fear-based. Right.
Yes,
and so
agree.
when we start to feel that contrast, and and I know for myself, like, wow, it's like seeing the world clearly. Like, the rain is gone, the sun comes out, and you feel this sense of calm and clear in terms of everything you see, and everything the actions you take and the results you get come from that place of clarity.
And taking clarity back to kind of where we started, which is energy. Is clarity an energy? Can it be an energy, or is there an equivalent?
Yeah, I think clarity is a result of an energy when your system is regulated. It feels like you're in the flow, that things come to you, clarity, that thoughts and decisions and actions, that the decisions to take the actions come from a place of peace. I mean, clarity comes from peace. It is an energy. That is a feeling, has a different feeling than kind of this frenetic, fear-based frustration and anxiety, right? That is an energy. We feel that energy.
Oh, I love that. Like, because I think peace of mind is something that feels like it should be, everywhere and free, but it takes quite a lot of work to have peace of mind. And obviously it depends who you are, how you've lived your life, etc. But accepting yourself and getting to know yourself and having peace of mind is a really, really important part of this. If we can think of peace of mind means that you can get to leading with clarity, which means that all of the kind of agendas and I'm struggling for the words, but it's that you're purely there to get the right
Yeah,
solution for that moment in time, that task, etc.
that's it. And it's so interesting because that's really, I believe, what ReSoul, the foundation is. It was when I was able, and I didn't understand how, all I wished for was happiness and peace, right? And I
In
love
your
the
mind, that's what you mean, like in your mind. Yes.
exactly, in my mind. And I didn't realize that it was inside out, right? Right. This peace of mind came from it was a natural result of when I was able to let go of the comparison, seeking approval, believing that I was enough and worthy of
Yeah.
success and love and happiness. That is inner peace when you can fully get to that place,
Yeah.
and to learn and grow and not beat
Yes.
yourself up.
What I have experienced is going through some stuff is almost like a fast track to peace and happiness because you are forced to. And not everybody, like you said, has to be in crisis. But I think there are lots of people that have really interesting stories where things
Right.
haven't quite gone to plan or something
Yeah.
has happened to them that has almost fast tracked that that they're actively seeking peace and happiness in their mind, which means that they have actively sought out how to address their energy, how to understand
Exactly.
themselves, how to kind of really work harder on this inside job. And in lots of ways, I feel like I'm grateful that I had to deal with some things earlier in life because I now am in tune with a lot of these things. It does not mean that I'm perfect at all. But that I have these tools and I have done some of this work to help me to be peaceful and happy every day, to therefore lead with clarity, etc., etc. And I think a lot of that came from a lot of pain and struggle, essentially.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't change a thing
Yeah.
because of where I am today. And I think that's the same of you. You wouldn't be where you are today if you hadn't been through all of that.
Absolutely. And I will say I believe that our challenges are actually our greatest gifts.
Yeah.
It's a forcing function should we choose to grow, learn from, but also the wisdom that we gain to be able to impact others, right? And
Mm,
positively impact, the
mm.
learnings. And I always say, as I found my path, I wanted to help others find theirs. I spent so many years of unnecessary suffering, through my own challenges of depression, anxiety, panic attacks, but it was all a result of me abandoning myself and believing that I wasn't worthy, not good enough, and smart enough through the experiences that I had had growing up, to divorce, to going through anorexia. Like all of that when I was young was about beating myself up and believing that I wasn't worthy. And
Yeah.
so this framework came, through working with shamans and coaches and psychologists and therapists and doctors. This was a consolidation for me to be able to resoul and to help people who don't necessarily have to go through crisis, because
Yeah.
we don't wish that
No,
on
we
people.
can avoid it.
Right? If
Let's
we can
try.
avoid
Yeah.
it, the unnecessary suffering. But if we can impart just this day to day place of learning how to feel peaceful, so that we can be calm and lead with clarity, right?
Mhm.
From a resouled place, how how wonderful is that we can actually experience our life personally and professionally, and it's all the same to me.
Yes,
And
all the
just
same.
feel
Agree.
human. Right. Yeah.
There is no difference between work and life. Life is work, work is life. I
Yeah.
loved what you said about we get gifts of wisdom through going through these things that we can help kind of pass on to others. And thank you so much for sharing all of that. I mean, I totally agree. I shared with you, I'm 12 years sober. That was a massive journey. You know, I have a 7-year-old disabled son who doesn't walk or talk. That was a massive journey. But I think all of those things, like you said, all of those things in your life have kind of added up to
Yeah.
helping you have a perspective and clarity in how you show up each day. And the best we can do is try and use that as often as possible for good and to encourage others to do the same.
Absolutely. And we will always, no matter who we are, will have, doesn't mean that life becomes easy. We will
No,
always have challenges.
there's more to come. Yeah.
There's right there, but it's how we move through those challenges, right?
Yeah.
And how we can self-care, resoul ourselves through those challenges, so that we can get through more effectively.
Totally agree. And I do think it's cumulative. So, I think going through, you know, issues with alcohol, addressing all of that took, a good few years of really intense hard work. But I
Yeah.
believe that really set me up to handle having
Yeah.
a son with a very
Yeah.
rare disease. It definitely not easily, but I was able to get through it. And, it was almost like I feel like the drinking and having to address that was kind of the dress rehearsal or the practice to be ready for that. And hopefully there'll be more to come, but hopefully the tools are there to help with that. And I think just to kind of bring it back to work slightly, even though we've been talking about really deep things in life, work is going through a massive change right now with AI. Nobody can predict the future. Things are changing every day.
Right.
It feels deeply uncomfortable and out of our control. The only thing that we can work on is ourselves and how we are going to show up to this, because we can't predict the future. And so I think the same principles apply, and we need to be focused on the inside job right now, because that's the best you can do for a future we don't know what's coming.
Exactly. And you're absolutely right. That is exactly it. It's the only thing that we have choice, that we can control, manage, master our internal state, our nervous systems, our energy. And because you're right that like every day is different, and you keep saying these unprecedented times, but that word even goes out the window. Like we cannot predict day to day.
Every day is unprecedented, so we better get ourselves fit to handle unprecedented, and that's going to be the norm. So we better get fit, work on our soul, our muscle soul.
That's it. Perfect. And no, I am so honored, Katie, to have been able to have this conversation with you. I reached out to you, because you are one person. Like I want to connect with people like yourself who are passionate about this work and making the world a better place, and it starts from within. So I am just grateful to know you, and love and excited to continue the conversation. So thank you for having me.
Same. I'm part of your ReSoul Revolution. I literally want a badge or something that says like ReSoul Revolution. I'm in. And thank you for hanging out with me today.
Thank you for having me. What a perfect Sunday.